Hey, I'm David Agranoff. I'm the author of a few novels from a couple of different publishers. My most well-known books are The Vegan Revolution with Zombies and Punk Rock Ghost Story. But my most recent is a science fiction novel from Clash Books called Goddamn Killing Machines. Think of it as The Dirty Dozen meets Philip K. Dick. Speaking of the author who wrote Man in the High Castle and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the novel that inspired Blade Runner, I do a podcast called Dickheads with my friends Larry and Anthony about Philip K. Dick and science fiction. The links are in the show notes. If you enjoy my commentary in sci-fi, make sure to go and listen to more of it there. So I wanted to do this commentary because I've seen a lot of videos about Star Trek Picard and Star Wars The Last Jedi here on the YouTubes. But I've not seen one that compares them and highlights why so many of the fans are wrong about those two pieces of classic works rebooted. One last thing before I start. I am a writer, not a filmmaker. I have zero editing skills, so this video is just going to be mostly random pictures, but the audio is the important part. Just so you know where I am coming from, my earliest memories are all related to space and science fiction. The first movie I remember seeing in the theater when I was probably too young for it was The Empire Strikes Back. For real, you young people have no idea what a shocker I Am Your Father was at the time. It's also important to note that many of us just didn't believe Darth Vader. I mean, who would you trust, Vader or Obi-Wan? Until Return of the Jedi, there was a lot of debate, and it was really interesting to see how that story played out. I grew up watching equal parts Star Trek and Star Wars. I love both, honestly, but since Trek seemed like more of a possible future of ours, it meant just a little bit more to me. The Wrath of Khan is probably the movie I've seen the most in my life, and I've watched every minute of Star Trek from the original series and animated series through Discovery and Picard. I loved most of it. I think competition between fans of each franchise is silly. You can love both Star Wars and Star Trek. There's no problem with loving both. On my podcast, sometimes I get accused of being too nice to the writers and giving stuff a pass. But that's not true. I can pick apart Star Trek V, Star Trek Nemesis, or The Rise of Skywalker for hours, but I didn't come here to do that. The backlash to Last Jedi surprised me, not only because I really loved it from the first time I saw it, but the sheer venom of the attacks just didn't make sense to me. I didn't like Star Trek V, but I can't imagine tagging Shatner on Twitter to accuse him of hating Star Trek or ruining my childhood. I was even more surprised when 2020's Picard suffered a smaller but similar backlash. I felt bad because when Last Jedi was getting trashed, I kept pointing out that Star Trek fans didn't do that, and that we've had several bad films and we got over it, including Into Darkness, which totally gave the finger to canon several times. I mean, Khan being like a white dude and beaming across the quadrant to Kronos kind of makes starships meaningless, right? I mean, that was my problem with it. So, anyways, during the weeks when Picard got rolling, I kept noticing parallels between Last Jedi and Picard. I gave Chabon and Kurtzman lots of credit because they learned the right lessons from Last Jedi and made Picard a better show for it. Unlike J.J. Abrams and Disney, who threw out what seemed to be a fairly good script in Duel of the Fates for Rise of Skywalker, which undid every exciting twist in The Last Jedi. Now look, I want to point out, I'm not anti-J.J. Abrams. I love his Mission Impossible movie. I like Super 8, and Fringe is one of my all-time favorite shows. I even thought Force Awakens was perfect for what it needed to do. Do I think that The Last Jedi and Picard are perfect? No, I do not. I will at some point talk about the things that I think they could have done better. But since that was released first, let's start with Last Jedi. To me, the fundamental aspects of storytelling will always come down to a few things. Most important are parallels and reversals. Those are two elements that drive plot. In the case of both franchises, character is one of the most important things. We love Kirk, Spock, and McCoy as much as we love Luke, Han, and Leia. The prequels didn't work as well because there was no set of characters that were the beating heart of the story in the same way. We didn't feel as connected to Anakin. And you can hear that fans admit, that The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager all took 3 seasons to really get going. And my theory is it took longer for the writers to figure out the dynamic that we loved. Picard and Data, Odo and Quark, Seven and the Doctor are all great examples of characters who have conflict and respect for each other at the same time. Conflict drives these narratives. Picard is a first season of a new show, and The Last Jedi is the second part of what I consider an unfinished trilogy that have different narrative jobs, but one thing they share in common is they are reuniting us with heroes we've not seen in many years. Of course, now we know that many fans don't like that these two men, Luke Skywalker and Jean-Luc Picard, grew older. Star Wars fans wanted Luke to take on the First Order with a lightsaber as a one-man army. Rian Johnson knew this, and in one of the genius moments of meta writing, he had Luke discuss this idea openly. In fact, throughout the script, Johnson was speaking directly to the audience, like, this is not going to happen the way you think it will. Let the past die, etc. These are great layered moments of writing, and more important when you consider Star Wars is written for fans of all ages. Star Trek fans were upset that the man who saved Earth from the Borg twice was getting cursed at by admirals and having a Romulan elf warrior fight for him. To me, the idea of our heroes getting old and needing help makes them more human, more real. My father was one of my heroes. I dedicated not 1 but 3 of my books to him. Before he passed, I watched him struggle even to stand up. This is a brutal reality that many of us fans have when our parents, our personal heroes, grow old. I love that Picard as a series didn't hide his age. I don't think that my father is any less of a hero because he was lucky enough for me to see him grow old and vulnerable. If Riker had not saved Picard from the Borg, would we have ever gotten that chance? He also has a role to play because the mystery at the heart of the story involves a conspiracy by a secret cabal of Romulan spies, and that would have never been exposed without Picard. He needed help, but when did he ever do it alone, right? He was always the captain of the crew. Last Jedi got anger from some because Luke rejected the idealism of the Jedi and went into hiding. Leave aside that both Obi-Wan and Yoda did the exact same thing. It makes perfect sense with his character that he would have to find another way to defeat Kylo and save the Resistance. People think that Rian Johnson doesn't understand Star Wars or Luke are not thinking about his character to the level that Johnson did. I mean, it was Johnson's job for years to think about what was in Luke's character. Parallels and reversals. Luke didn't want to give in to his anger like his father did. Indeed, Last Jedi was not the first time he threw his lightsaber away. In Return of the Jedi, he tossed his lightsaber and told the Emperor that he would never go to the dark side because he was a Jedi like his father. Any of us who watched the prequels and studied the history as Luke would have could see that the Jedi failed and allowed Darth Sidious to rise. The Jedi were pawns in a galactic war, often committing war crimes on behalf of the Republic, and eventually discovered that they were being used by Sidious himself. It makes sense if Ben Solo went to the dark side that Luke would see history repeat itself as it was doing in Force Awakens. Anyone objectively looking at the Jedi's legacy in the Skywalker saga would have to see that the Jedi failed, and Luke has the right to question that legacy. One reason I love Last Jedi is that Rian Johnson followed the basic structure of Empire, with the rebels on the run, Rey in training, and in conflict with the dark side, but he reversed and surprised us with twists. Snoke dying, Luke refusing to leave with Rey when you think it's obvious. I mean, it would have looked cool for Luke to go crouching tiger on the First Order, but Johnson kept true to the character and gave us a surprise ending. This non-violent solution uses Kylo's hatred and anger as a tool to distract him as the rebels flee. It is in character with a guy who threw his lightsaber away and refused to strike down Darth Vader in return. The genius of Last Jedi is that it parallels classic Star Wars structure and reverses it at every turn. Not only does Luke tell Rey no, but she is nothing, and she comes from nothing. That's her worst fear. She and Ben kill the bad guy with a full act to go, and for a moment our jaws are on the floor. The Last Jedi is a masterclass in rebooting a franchise, and Rian Johnson to put it in Star Trek terms, was playing 3D chess. Rise of Skywalker undoes all that and seems to be co-written by a subreddit. I think that the writers of both franchises did the right thing by following the three principles of storytelling laid out, that I've laid out, parallels, reversals, and character conflict. I hope Trek doesn't overcorrect like Star Wars did. Picard thankfully learned the right lessons from The Last Jedi, and again, fans were mad. Jedi idealism in Star Wars gave way to Roddenberry idealism of Star Trek. Fans were mad that people have jobs in this new Star Trek, that the Federation's almost anarchist utopia of post-capitalism seems to have given way to disgruntled shipbuilders with android slaves and a Bangkok-like planet that seems like the planet in my 2015 novel co-written with Ed Morris called Flesh Trade. Great minds think alike. Anywho, that's a side thing. Anyways, Roddenberry purists want the Trek future to be a perfect one. We saw how stale and bland it could be in the first season of The Next Generation. In contrast, myself included, myself included, think that Deep Space Nine, a show that takes place on the frontier, is the best of the franchise. Capitalism and the Federation idealism didn't reach all the way out to the setting of that show, and it was better for it. The writers knew that they had to get away for conflict purposes, and that's why in the next show, Voyager got thrown all the way to the Delta Quadrant, away from Starfleet altogether. It makes canon sense that the Federation would be in economic shambles in Picard. We are 2 decades out from 2 Borg invasions and a costly war with the Dominion. The Romulan supernova would disrupt the Beta Quadrant even more. Whatever utopia system would have massive supply chain disruptions, and populations would be suffering from the wars long after they were done. I know that's not very Roddenberry. I get it. But this is the canon now. And Picard, an idealist and privileged outsider as a Starfleet captain, would likely get upset when the Federation starts ignoring its ideals and letting the Romulans die. But this is not without precedent in Trek history. Kirk was willing to let the Klingons die after their moon blew up in undiscovered country. And that's good storytelling. Kirk is still angry about the murder of his son by Klingons in Star Trek III and does not want to help and is willing to let the Klingons die. As Trek fans, we are conditioned at this point to hate Klingons, so we totally get it. But the events of the movie changes Kirk and the audience's mind. That's a character arc. That's fundamental storytelling. The reason the first Roddenberry seasons of TNG are so bland is that the characters are too perfect and the stories lack arcs. It's not until Riker gets pressured to take his own command and Picard struggles with having been assimilated and Worf is shamed as a Klingon that the show gets really good. Just 3 examples, but the whole cast got arcs eventually, and sometimes more than one. Picard is a show that benefits from the entire Federation getting that same kind of arc. This is something that is building in all modern Trek via Discovery and Picard. The problem fans are having is that we have not seen the end of this arc. Now, Alex Kurtzman and crew can solve this over the coming shows, and that's something I'm very excited to see. I hope they don't rush it like Star Wars did. The plan for the new Star Wars trilogy was upended by the death of Carrie Fisher. Han died in Force Awakens, and The Last Jedi was Luke's film, and ideally Duel of Fates would have ended with Leia confronting her son, who had become the villain, after killing Snoke in Last Jedi. Rian Johnson understood that he was ending Luke's arc in Last Jedi, and I believe he took it very seriously, and I for one thought he nailed it. I have watched it many times and still get emotional each time Luke is staring at the 2 sons as he's dying. I think, by the way, that Luke is projecting himself to his home in those final moments. I'm right? At me, Rian Johnson. Just let me know. If that's how the series had ended right there, with the end of Last Jedi. I would have thought it was a good ending. Luke gave his life, saved the day, and again without compromising his beliefs. And more importantly, Broom Boy at the end in the stables is inspired and wanting to follow the Force. And since Rey, being no one, has taught us that you don't have to be in a bloodline to matter, we're giving hope that the franchise is moving on to fresh ground, new characters, and new places. Then came Rise of Skywalker. I said I wasn't going to be negative, so we're just not going to talk about Rise of Skywalker. The Force Awakens was really good. I really did like The Force Awakens. So, can I speak to the Picard and Discovery writers for a moment? You learn the right lessons from Sensei Rian Johnson. In 20 years, the anger will have faded and Last Jedi will remain a classic. Maybe you were not thinking about Last Jedi at all. It may just be great minds thinking alike. The direction of Star Trek is really important to me. You can't rush it. Please, everybody. I didn't like the tone of JJ's 2009 reboot, but it felt like it was Star Wars paced, but I accepted that it was needed to bring back Trek. I understand that it doesn't have to appeal to me perfectly. There's moments, certainly early in Discovery, that I didn't really enjoy. It took me about 7 episodes before I started to get into Discovery, and I really like the second season. I'm hoping that many titles from Section 31, oh my god, I would give a toe to write for that show. Like seriously, I would cut off a toe. And hopefully Star Trek Pike or the 7 of 9 spinoff. I mean, I would give a toe to write for either of those two. Okay, I would write for any Star Trek. And honestly, if you've made it this far in my commentary, 16 minutes already, well, then why not add Alex Kurtzman and tell him that you think he should hire me to write for Star Trek? Anyways, I would work on any of their shows. That is besides the point. The direction of Trek. Anyways, I think one aspect that Picard was missing was a chance to explore the after effects of the Dominion Wars and the supernova. A 7 of 9 storyline about the Rangers having to fill the gap in the lawless frontier has amazing potential for storylines in TV, comics, and novels. Again, a toe. One of my toes. I mean, you might need a toe. I don't know. Anyways, it parallels the time we are living in as the economy hovers on collapse. Star Trek reflects our time. Stories about the Federation trying to unite member worlds and hold the coalition together is exactly what we need in Star Trek. I would love to see Picard go in that direction, but Section 31 seems like the best show poised for that. I mean, a rogue group with illegal technology, extra legal means, and the freedom to go anywhere or win in the Trek universe seems like the perfect place to explore the parallels and reversals that make stories great. Okay, that's it. I love Last Jedi, and if you do too, you can tell me that in the comments, and if you hate Last Jedi and Picard, I'm sure you're going to bombard me. But remember, this is just one nerd's opinion. You don't have to agree with it. But if you made it this far and you agree with it, feel free to share this video. Thanks.